My name is Herbert Small, First Lieutenant, Army Air Corps, retired. I was in the 52nd Squadron, Bomb Squadron, 29th Bomb Group, 314th Wing of the 20th Air Force, stationed on Guam. My childhood started out on March 23rd, 1924. My father died in 1934. I was 10 years old, leaving my mother with 3 young children, a widow. I began work at 16 in 1940 and then left high school in my junior year for a full-time job. The thrust at that time was money. We had no income whatsoever, and as I said, 3 young children. The war began, of course, you all know, December 7th, 1941, at Pearl Harbor. I volunteered for the Aviation Cadet Program of the Army Air Corps in May of 1942 at the age of 18. I passed well, originally, in order to become an aviation cadet, you had to be a college graduate. And they couldn't get enough men, so they dropped it down to 2 years of college. Then they dropped it down to a high school diploma. Then they drug up the dregs of the barrel, and all you had to do was pass their exams, physical and mental. And believe me, they put you through the ringer. In the meantime, the Army Draft Board called me. And I said, you can't draft me, I just volunteered for the Air Corps. They said, no, 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 you have to be drafted. So what happened is they made an agreement between the Air Corps and the Draft Board is I was drafted with a whole group of men. They got on a bus and went to the railroad station. I went home and waited for the Air Corps to call me. Well, they did call me within 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And I went off to basic training. Basic training I did with a wooden rifle, and it still had my civilian shoes on. That's how bad things were up at Camp Devens in Massachusetts. After basic, I got a 10-day leave, and I went home, and lo and behold, I got married. And when I left Mom, I left her a little package. The little package is now 69 years old. Anyhow,
too young.
There's an older package.
Older package.
Congress said in order to be an officer, you had to be an officer and a gentleman. So in order to make me a gentleman, they sent me to college. So here I am at Southwestern Presbyterian College in Memphis, Tennessee. No high school education, and I got 2 years of college credits for 6 months, 3 months in regular civilian college. In fact, it was real Southern. The architecture was beautiful. It was like Yale, but very small. And being a Southern college, we marched into the dining hall, and of course the students were still in session at the same time. We marched into the dining hall, sat down at these long tables and benches, and being cadets, we sat at attention and were served by black waiters in white coats and white gloves. That was a Southern school, not the Army. Anyhow, I got 2 years of college credits at Southwestern, and I had never finished high school, and I still have a certificate granting me 2 years of college credits. I never went back to school when I got out of the service, which I should have, but I had a wife and child at home, and I had to go to work. While at college, we soloed in a Piper Cub. Piper Cub was a little single engine, 2-passenger, forward and back, and made out of canvas. And we flew out of the cotton fields of Mississippi. And I soloed in that thing. And it was a type of airplane, if you got in trouble, all you had to do was take your hands off the stick and it would come out of the spin by itself. So that was my solo. After college, I went to SAC. SAC was San Antonio Aviation Cadet Center in San Antonio, Texas. We were there for 6 weeks, and they put us through all sorts of tests again, everything imaginable, even depth perception, and psychological, and of course educational. And at the end of the training at SAC, or testing at SAC, you sat down in front of a board of officers, and they said, Cadet Small, you're not qualified to be a pilot. You are qualified to be a navigator, or if you choose, a bombardier. I thought about it, and a navigator sits in a dark hole, never sees anything, never sees daylight, and he pushes a pencil all day. I said, no, that's not me. I said, I want to be out in the daylight. So I chose a bombardier, and in all this, I had 2 years of schooling between gunnery school, air-to-ground, air-to-air, navigation, and bombardier schools. In gunnery school, we were chastised for shooting up the cattle out in the Texas desert. It was we'd fly in a little 2-seater open plane, and you'd have a strap holding you in, and you lean out of the rear seat with a .30 caliber machine gun. It was like shooting fish in a bar. It was fun. My whole service time was fun. Anyhow, from there we went to Bombardier School in, where was Bombardier? Memphis, Tennessee. They sent us to Bombardier School, and I met 2 of my best friends there. One was a Jewish kid out of Brooklyn, Bert Levy, and I can't remember the other one. Anyhow, at Bombardier School, you graduated as a 2nd lieutenant, and you went up on the stage, and they awarded you your bars and your wings, and they handed you a sheath of paper, which were your assignments. Everybody got the sheet of paper, except about 12 of us. We didn't get any orders to go anywhere. So we're sitting there waiting and waiting. What the hell's the matter with us? We didn't get assigned anywhere. So after the graduation, they brought us into another room and said, you 6 have been chosen for a secret project, and you're going to be sent to Lincoln, Nebraska. Lincoln, Nebraska, in the middle of nowhere. What's a secret project? Nobody even knew. Nobody even heard of a B-29 at that stage. We get to Lincoln, Nebraska, and they said, well, we have nothing for you, go home for 10 days. Oh, in between graduation and Lincoln, they sent us home for 10 days. We got to Lincoln, they sent us back home for another 10 days. So we had a ball. I was assigned to the 52nd Bomb Squadron and was sent to Pratt, Kansas, which was a training field for organizing the squadrons into bomb groups and bomb wings, etc. In training, it was all a big game. We flew in an airplane called AT-11. It was a twin-engine, nice little airplane, and 2 students would fly, 2 bombardier students, and of course a pilot. One student would navigate out to where our target was, and the other student was bomb. And then coming back, we'd reverse, and the other student would bomb, and the other student would navigate. And our target was a bullseye painted in the desert. And we used a 100-pound bomb filled with sand and a black fuse in the tail. When the bomb hit, the black fuse would go off, and you took pictures of where the fuse was in the circle, if you hit the circle, and that's how you got scored in your bombing ability. In the center of this circle was a little wooden shack like an outhouse. And if you ever hit the shack, you were a hero. We spent, as I said, 3 months in Pratt training as a crew. My wife was with me in Pratt, Kansas. She was also with me in Bombardier School, Midland, Texas.
Right.
And then she was pregnant at that time and got malaria.
Right.
She visited at the hospital there. You know, the cadet wives had a group, and they would visit the hospital where they were bringing back veterans from the Pacific War. And obviously one of them had malaria. Mosquito bit the malaria one and bit Mom. She ended up with malaria carrying a baby, which at the time was unheard of. You can't do it. But we have the proof you can do it. We had good times there, a lot of parties. And then we would do whiskey runs. A couple of crewmen would take a B-7. Kansas was dry. There was no liquor in Kansas. And you can imagine an Army air base and no liquor. We would take a B-17 down to Texas, load it up with whiskey, and fly it back into the base, but didn't have any police other than our own. And that went on for 2 or 3 months. And then 1 month we come in with a whiskey run, and 2 big black cars came pulling in as the ship landed. Who was it but Internal Revenue? They confiscated the whole load, and we lost it. But we continued the whiskey runs, and we had great parties. I remember one in particular. My wife going around, she had a few drinks, going around cutting ties off.
That was the first.
And who do you think she picks on? The colonel. Not the lieutenant colonel or the major. Our colonel, he was wing commander. She cut his tie off. Ho, 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 big joke. But that's how we trained.